Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Gyantimidandasya Gyananjana Chalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya
Recording in progress.
Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juthapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Pitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanda Radha Kanda Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine. Thank you, Vaisesika Prabhu, and thank you to all the assembled devotees. I am truly honored and grateful to participate in this important transcendental project of the Bhadra Purnima Srimad Bhagavatam distribution event. How deeply grateful, not only myself, but all the leaders of ISKCON and all the devotees of ISKCON, and I believe all of our previous acharyas are, to Vaisesika Prabhu for inspiring this wonderful opportunity for such a endearing form of devotional service. This year is very special. It is the 125th anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's appearance in this world. Srila Prabhupada was born under a jackfruit tree in Calcutta in 1896. this coming year, 2022, which is just a few months away, is the 100th anniversary of Srila Prabhupada first meeting his beloved Guru Maharaj, His Divine Grace, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada met him, it will be 100 years ago, under a jackfruit tree at the first preaching center of his Guru Maharaj at Ultadunga Junction Road in Calcutta. We know well the story, but the more we meditate on this wonderful pastime of Srila Prabhupada's meeting his Guru Maharaj, the deeper our experience of appreciation and hopefully dedication will become. During that first meeting 100 years ago, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave Srila Prabhupada a life mission. Srila Prabhupada bowed down to him, and when he was just getting up on that rooftop, Srila Saraswati Thakur said, "You are an intelligent young man. You should take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the whole world in the English language." Srila Prabhupada took that instruction as his life and soul. We know the story how Srila Prabhupada at the time, he was only in his 20s. He had recently been married and just recently had a first child. And he was a member of Gandhi's liberation movement. So, he was very busy between, Gandhi's movement and, his profession, working with Bose's laboratory. He was very busy. But from the moment he received this instruction, he began preparing. Sometimes when Srila Prabhupada reflected on how impossible it was to do what he was being asked. In fact, he told Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada that at this time, India is still under the British control. Who will respect the message of India outside of our boundaries if we are a subordinate country? First, let us get freedom. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, all these material considerations are always coming and going. Who's in political power? What pandemics may be there or not, what the economic situation may be, whether there's a war or peace. These things are always changing in this world. But the one eternal truth is that we're all part and parcel of Krishna. We're all eternal servants of Krishna. Therefore, this message has the greatest need above and beyond everything else. There is no other consideration that can compare to the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And Srila Prabhupada, he said, I accepted him at that moment as my guru. But such an impossible mission. What means did he have? But Srila Prabhupada explained that when he was reading the Bhagavad Gita, there was was a purport by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to the verse Yavashayatmaka Budhir Ekeha Kurunandana Bahushaka Hinantascha Budhayo Vyavashayana. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. The intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains this verse by saying, this means one must make the order of one's spiritual master one's life and soul. And Srila Prabhupada made this mission to take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the world, his life and soul. Interestingly, when Srila Prabhupada was in his culmination of preparation, he was living at Sri Sri Radha Damodar Temple in Vrindavan. Just a few feet away from the Samadhi Mandir and the Bhajan Kutir of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami. Srila Prabhupada made it his literary mission in the world to translate and write commentaries in the English language of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, he spent years with no means. His publications of Srimad Bhagavatam, he sat under a little kerosene lantern, starting like at midnight in the quiet of Vrindavan, studying the commentaries of the previous acharyas, immersed in loving, compassionate prayers. And then he had a simple manual typewriter. Srila Prabhupada sat on the floor. He had a little floor type of desk, and he typed away, so absorbed throughout the early morning, what we consider night, and through most of the day. Srila Prabhupada told us that his purports were his spiritual ecstasies. Sitting in that simple little room at Radha Damodar, Srila Prabhupada was pouring the love and the compassion of his heart out to the whole world in his Srimad Bhagavatam. He had no money. He had no followers. He would take a third-class train to Delhi, and somehow or other, by making friends with someone, a respectable religious person, he convinced that person to print the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first volume, without any upfront payment, but that Srila Prabhupada would pay him back on consignment. And similar for the second volume. And Srila Prabhupada, as far as I remember, he actually begged from Sumati Morarji, a very saintly lady from the Pushti Marg, the Sampradaya of Sripad Vallabhacharya, to help sponsor the printing of the third volume. After the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam was published, that's when Srila Prabhupada felt, now is the time. I have the Srimad Bhagavatam to carry with me to go to the West. because Lord Chaitanya's teachings were the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam Amalam Puranam, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declared that it is the spotless Purana. Dharma Projita Kaitaputra. It is the very essence, the culmination, the crest jewel of all the Vedic literatures. It is the natural commentary of the Vedanta Sutra, written by Vyasadeva himself, the author and compiler of Vedas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all of his followers, they lived Srimad Bhagavatam, and every word they taught was from the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a beautiful story in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat where Lord Chaitanya had his first meeting with Lord Nityananda Prabhu at the house of Nandanacharya. Lord Gauranga, among his devotees with Srivas, they approached Nandanacharya's house and they saw Lord Nityananda. And Lord Nityananda saw Lord Chaitanya, and they gazed at each other. They were both stunned. And at that moment, Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya told Srivas to recite a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, describing from the 10th canto the beautiful darshan of Krishna as he's coming in with the cows from the pastures. And upon hearing that verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Nityananda Prabhu went into such a state of transcendental ecstasy that he fell unconscious. And Lord Chaitanya told Srivas to continue reciting that verse. That was their first meeting. Lord Chaitanya brought Nityananda Prabhu through the Bhagavatam. He brought him back to consciousness. And together they embraced and they danced and established the Sankirtan movement. There's the beautiful story of Devananda Pandit, who lived in Kuliagram in the Navadvip area. And he was a scholar of Srimad Bhagavatam. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very displeased with him because he was not teaching the truth of the Bhagavatam. And later on, when Devananda Pandit, due to the association of Agreshwar Pandit, his heart changed. He prayed to Lord Chaitanya, how should I teach Srimad Bhagavatam? And Mahaprabhu gave such a beautiful glorification of Bhagavad Purana. He told him that every syllable of every word of every page of the Srimad Bhagavatam is teaching only one thing: pure, unconditional, unalloyed devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. Teach it in this way. There is a story when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling and he was returning toward Navadvip. He came to a village called Varahanagara. And there he heard a devotee reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya was so deeply ecstatic. He went to the courtyard of that devotee's ashram, or that home, his home, and said, go on reciting. And this devotee, for about 9 hours, he just chanted the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the whole time, Lord Chaitanya, weeping tears and dancing in ecstasy, kept saying, go on reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, go on reciting. And after Lord Chaitanya embraced him and gave him the name Bhagavat Acharya. When Lord Chaitanya was in Puri, every day he would go to Tota Gopinath temple to meet with his dearmost devotee, Gadadhar Pandit. Gadadhar Pandit is an expansion of Srimati Radharani. Together, they would read and discuss the Srimad Bhagavatam every day for several hours. In fact, years later, Srinivasacharya, his father was Chaitanya Das, a great devotee. The first time he ever met Lord Chaitanya is he was just passing through Katwa. And on the bank of the Ganga, he saw hundreds of people falling to the ground, crying. He was wondering what's happening. And when he came closer, he witnessed the haircutting ceremony of Lord Gauranga on the day he took sannyas. From that day, all he could do was say Chaitanya Das. When he heard Keshav Bharati Maharaj say, your new name will be Shri Krishna Chaitanya. Srinivasacharya heard the glories of Lord Chaitanya his whole life. And when he came old enough, he left Jajigram, his home, to go to Puri. In those days, it was a long walk. When he came to the outskirts of Puri, he saw people lamenting. He asked, what happened? They said, you have not heard? Our beloved Lord Gauranga has disappeared from the world. Srinivas fainted. In his state, Lord Chaitanya appeared to him in a dream and instructed him, go to the Tota Gopinath temple and study Srimad Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. This is how Mahaprabhu was preparing the next generation of his sampradaya. When Srinivasacharya went to Gadadhar Pandit told him that this will be very difficult to do. He showed him his only copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He said, every day when our beloved Lord Gauranga and myself would read, every page of the Bhagavatam we would cry and cry and cry. And the confluence of our tears of love washed away the script of the book. It is not possible to read anymore. Vrindavan Das Thakur tells that when Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya and Gadadhar Pandit would read Srimad Bhagavatam, when they read the story of Dhruva Maharaj or the story of Prahlad Maharaj, they tasted such sweet nectar, meditating on their pure unconditional love. In Dhruva's case, his transformation, that Lord Chaitanya would not go on to the next story until they read and discussed 100 times minimum. That is the taste that they had. Gadadhar Pandit is Srimati Radharani. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radha Bhavaduti Suvalitam Nomi Krishna Swarupam. He is Krishna who's come to this world to taste the sweetness of Radha's love. And he was so permeated with Radha's love, he had Radha's complexion of of illustrious gold. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the mood of Sri Radha Bhava, Mahabhava, how he was tasting nectar, reading about Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. Because every word of the Bhagavatam is leading us to the 10th canto of the Vrindavan Leela. And the 10th canto is leading us to the Rasa Leela, and the Rasa Leela is bringing us to that point where Srimati Radharani is declared to be the greatest of all devotees who give pleasure to Krishna. That is Srimad Bhagavatam. We take things for granted, but we could learn to not take things for granted just by hearing. Not hearing in a theoretical way, but feeling what we're reading and hearing. Srinivasacharya, the only reason he wanted to live was to follow Lord Chaitanya's instruction, to study Srimad Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. But the Srimad Bhagavatam was washed away by the confluence of the tears of the two lords. Gadadhar Pandit instructed him, the only way to get another Srimad Bhagavatam is you have to go all the way back to Bengal, where you will find a hand scribe to personally, by hand, carve it in palm leaves, all 18,000 verses. That takes years. Srinivasacharya had to walk all the way back several weeks, and there he found someone to make a copy of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And a couple years later, when it was finally complete, he brought it back to Puri. But when he reached Puri, he received the news. Gadadhar Pandit, he could not tolerate the separation of Lord Chaitanya any longer. He only lived to teach the Bhagavatam to Srinivasacharya, but it was no longer possible. He had disappeared from the world. Now what? Srinivasacharya, he was practically ripping open his own chest to find the Lord in his heart, and he fell unconscious. And Gadadhar Pandit appeared to him in a vision and gave him the instruction, go to Vrindavan and study Srimad Bhagavatam from Srila Jiva Goswami. He walked over 1,000 miles to Sri Vrindavan Dham, where he spent years of his life rendering humble service, along with Narottam Das Thakur and Shyamananda Goswami, studying the works of the 6 Goswamis. The guru and elder brother of Rupa Goswami was Sanatana Goswami. In the book Bhakta Ratnakar, there's a wonderful description. When Sanatana Goswami was living in Ramakeli, one night he had a dream. A divine personality, a Brahmin, came to his door and gave him the gift of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Please understand how rare and precious this gift was. Because 18,000 verses, and every word of it had to be carved in palm leaves or put into the parch of trees. There were no printing presses. He was given a Srimad Bhagavatam in the dream. He was so happy. He began to read it, and tears of ecstatic love were coming right from his heart. Then he woke up, and he didn't have a Srimad Bhagavatam. He was practically stunned in the agony of separation from the Srimad Bhagavatam. He was longing, yearning, praying to have a Srimad Bhagavatam. It was more precious than life itself. And as he was in such a state of loving separation and yearning, that same Brahman that appeared in his dream came to his door and gave him the gift, the matchless gift of Srimad Bhagavatam. From that day on, the Srimad Bhagavatam was the life and soul of Sanatana Goswami. Whenever he wasn't managing the state as the Prime Minister of Bengal, he and his brother Rupa Goswami were studying Srimad Bhagavatam. They were so absorbed in Krishna's divine pastimes that they formed a Kadamba Kanana, a wonderful garden of Kadamba trees where they made a replica of Vrindavan. They created Radha Kund, Shama Kund. They constructed a small Madan Mohan temple. The various places of Krishna's Leela, they would read the Srimad Bhagavatam, study Srimad Bhagavatam, and have parikrama of their little replication of Vrindavan. And when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to Ramkeli, he gave them the instructions to go to Vrindavan. All of Lord Chaitanya's followers based their life on the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sanatana Goswami wrote his Tika, his commentary. Srila Rupa Goswami, he based all of his wonderful books according to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He took the seeds of Srimad Bhagavatam and expanded them into his great library of literatures. Srila Rupa Goswami's foremost disciple and nephew was Sri Jiva Goswami. Sri Jiva Goswami, in his books, the Tat Sandarbhas, Gopal Champu, he also expanded on the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Tat Sandarbha, he establishes at the very beginning, Sat Sandarbhas, the ultimate pramana, the ultimate evidence of truth is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is the way he educated Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivasacharya, and Shamananda Goswami. The Vaishnav Acharyas have declared Jiva Goswami the greatest philosopher who has ever lived. And the entirety of his philosophy is based on the spirit and the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, he was the son of Tapan Mishra, a pure devotee of the Lord. He came and lived with Lord Chaitanya in Puri for 8 months. And Lord Chaitanya gave him an instruction: go back to Varanasi and serve your mother and father as long as they live. He told him, do not marry. Dedicate yourself to every day hearing and studying the Srimad Bhagavatam with a self-realized soul. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, for the next 4 years, he took care of his parents, who were also pure devotees of the Lord, intimate associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And every day, throughout the day, he studied and discussed Srimad Bhagavatam with a great devotee. When his parents were in their last breath, they blessed Raghunath Bhatta Goswami to join Lord Chaitanya in Puri. And then chanting the holy names of Lord Gauranga, they passed from this world. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami returned to Puri. And he was in the inner circle of Lord Chaitanya's associates, massaging the Lord's feet, cooking for the Lord. Everything he cooked was like nectar. When Raghunath Bhatta Goswami cooked, he cooked with so much devotion that Srimati Radharani cooked through him. And he would regularly invite Lord Chaitanya to taste that prasad. After 8 months, Lord Chaitanya sent Raghunath Bhatta Goswami to Vrindavan to become the most intimate, loving brother with Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. And gradually Raghunath Das Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and Jiva Goswami, they were all together in Vrindavan. And one of the most treasured pastimes that they would relish together was Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. He would every day for hours recite the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. He would recite each verse in 5 different melodies. His voice was Kokilavani. It was sweeter than a cuckoo bird. And how he would relish repeating the Bhagavatam, and how all the Goswamis would just be drowning in an ocean of ecstatic joy, hearing from his lips the Srimad Bhagavatam. Such a saint. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami became such an acharya. One of his disciples, the Rajman Singh, who was a general in Akbar's army, actually arranged to build the entirety of the Govindaji temple in Vrindavan. The largest, most magnificent temple in all of North India at that time, hand-carved sandstone, 7 stories high. And through the Rajman Singh, Akbar, who was a Mughal emperor, became so favorable to Krishna consciousness that Vrindavan became an extraordinary place of pilgrimage as Lord Chaitanya envisioned. They built the Radha Gopinath temple, the Radha Damodar temple, the Radha Raman temple, Govindaji temple. This was the influence of Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. But what was his main service? He didn't have his own deity. He simply dedicated his life and soul to assisting Srila Rupa Goswami in worshiping Sri Sri Radha Govinda. Such an acharya. such a learned scholar, such a pure, unalloyed devotee, Raga Manjari in the spiritual world. But he wanted nothing else but to be the servant of the servant of the servant of Sri Rupa Goswami, just assisting the others. The Srimad Bhagavatam was commented on by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of the most exalted, sweetest, most comprehensive and loving commentaries that the world has ever seen. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, from his childhood, he loved the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's described when he was reading the Srimad Bhagavatam or writing his commentaries, even in a monsoon rain storm, and he was sitting in an open field, not a drop of rain would touch him. Even in the blazing summer sun, there was always shade over his head. That is how Krishna and Sri Radharani reciprocated with his taste for hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, at the time of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, our Gaudiya Parampara, no one even considered a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. Simply because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, Vedaischa sarveraham eva vedyo vedanta krit veda vedeva chaham. Krishna tells, I'm the compiler of the Vedas. I'm the knower of Vedanta. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Brajendra Nandanje Sachi Shuta Hoilo She Balarama Hoilo Nitai. Brajendra Nandana Krishna has appeared as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His expansion, the literary incarnation, Veda Vyas, was empowered by Krishna to write the Vedanta Sutra. And we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself how after compiling all the Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, after compiling the Puranas, 108 Upanishads, the Itihastas like Mahabharata, he was feeling an emptiness in his heart. Living on the banks of the Saraswati River in Bhadrik Ashram, he was contemplating why. Out of compassion for all beings, he's given so many literatures of Veda. And then Narada Muni came and told him, you will be satisfied when you write the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because that is the culmination. That scripture which exclusively discusses the topic of pure unalloyed devotional service and which culminates in Krishna's pastimes in Gokula Vrindavan. That was the last word of Veda Vyas. So in the direction of Lord Chaitanya, throughout the ages, the Acharyas wrote commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam. But when our sampradaya was being challenged near Jaipur in a place called Galta, the king of Jaipur cried for Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, please come. These pundits have forced me to take Radharani off the altar of Govindaji because they're declaring that the worship of Radharani on the altar is not there in Parampara. And not only that, they would not allow the Gaudiya Vaishnavas to worship the deity because they say our parampara is not bona fide without a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the great commentator of Srimad Bhagavatam, sent his Shiksha disciple Baladev Vidyabhushan to Galta. And when he was challenged in a few days, he prayed to Govindaji, please give me the power. And Govindaji spoke through his heart and the Govinda Bhasya. It is a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra that's based on Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm just giving a few hints of how important the Srimad Bhagavatam is to the followers of Lord Chaitanya and our parampara, and how important it is to the world. Therefore, 100 years ago, 1922, when Srila Prabhupada was given this message, take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in the English language all over the world. How did he do that? By translating and writing English purports to the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so beautiful to meditate on this. How did Srila Prabhupada begin this great work of his life? The introduction to the first volume of the first canto, Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada, he wrote a summary of the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Why did he do that? Because Lord Chaitanya's life was the very personification of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. By his mercy, we can understand Srimad Bhagavatam as it is. It is the postgraduate study of the Bhagavad Gita. It is the cream of all Vedic literature. And Srila Prabhupada went back to Mumbai after completing the first volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he stood at the stairs of the office of Sumati Maharji and wouldn't move and wouldn't even eat. He fasted until she gave him a free passage on a cargo ship to New York City. In her motherly compassion to Srila Prabhupada, even though Srila Prabhupada was actually older than her, she was like a mother to him. Swamiji, this voyage is very rough over this Arabian Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. And America, New York, it's a very, very harsh place, very materialistic, so much sinful activity. And in the winter, it's very cold. You will surely die. Do not go. But Srila Prabhupada was begging. What was he begging? He was begging for the opportunity to carry out the wish of his Guru Maharaj, to take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the Western world. And when Srila Prabhupada boarded the Jaladuta in Calcutta, it went around India to Cochin. And in Cochin, it was a very historical event. The Srimad Bhagavatams arrived by trucks and were put on board of the Jaladuta. And Srila Prabhupada said later, when he arrived in New York, there was, just a stranger who was paid to put him on a bus. But even before he met that stranger, when he was coming down the ramp of the boat, he had no money. He didn't know anyone. He was in a strange land. He didn't even know if anybody in America would understand the way he spoke English. But he said, but he felt completely confident because he knew he had with him the Srimad Bhagavatam and the holy names of the Lord. And when Srila Prabhupada was living in New York in the Bowery and in other places, his main preaching at the beginning was going to bookstores with his Srimad Bhagavatam and trying to convince the owners of the bookstores to put his books on shelf. Don't pay me anything. If somebody buys them, I'll come and pick up the money, but just keep the book here. And there are so many letters of Srila Prabhupada in those early days before anybody was following him, where he would write to bookstore owners in India, especially in Mumbai or Bombay, because he left Srimad Bhagavatams with them to sell at various. In fact, there was a distributor that Srila Prabhupada entrusted many of his Srimad Bhagavatams, and he asked him to fill up the bookstores with these books. And Srila Prabhupada was regularly writing and asking for reports how the Srimad Bhagavatam was being sold in India. And at one time he got a letter back and he said, I'm sorry, nobody's buying. And most of the bookstores are sending back the books to me because they're not selling. Srila Prabhupada, Vyavashayatmaka Buddhi, nothing could dampen his determination to serve the desire of his Guru Maharaj. And gradually, he met Mukunda Goswami Maharaj, Janaki Devi, and other devotees and established 26 Second Avenue. And we hear from great souls like His Grace Brahmananda Prabhu, how when he first met Srila Prabhupada sold him a set of Srimad Bhagavatams. It was so much his life's mission. And after establishing the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and sending devotees to various parts of the world to open centers, still, he would rise in the middle of the night every day. And when everyone was sleeping, he was writing his translations and purports for Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm just remembering how eager we were for every new volume to come. In 1972, I was living way up in that old farm of New Vrindavan. There was just 6 people living up there. One of those 6 people was Hayagriva Prabhu and Shamadasi and Samba. And Hayagriva was he was editing Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam. And I remember before anyone in the world heard Srila Prabhupada's translations and purports, Hayagriva would come once a week to the temple room. There was only 6 or 7 devotees, and he would read from Srila Prabhupada's transcriptions. I remember at that time it was the 4th canto. I believe Srila Prabhupada would put it on tape and send the tapes to Pradyumna and Arundhati Prabhus, and they would transcribe it and send it to Hayagriva Prabhu, and he would edit it. And Hayagriva, before sending it, for further progress in the publication, he would read to us. And how hungry, how thirsty we were for every volume to come out. I remember the devotees, they couldn't wait. When Srila Prabhupada was working on the 2nd canto, instead of waiting for the whole book to be published, they'd publish small paperback books of 1 chapter at a time. You remember Vaisesika Prabhu? The Lord of the Heart. And devotees would be so eager to get that new chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes. And at a certain time, I guess it was around 1970, Srila Prabhupada, when he was only 69 years old on Jaladuta, he had 2 heart attacks and seasickness. And when he was only 70 years old in New York, he had a stroke. So Srila Prabhupada wanted to give us the 10th canto. So he delayed the progress of writing the entire Srimad Bhagavatam verse by verse in the most authentic, authorized way. He published it with the original Devanagari Sanskrit, word for word transliteration, and then after studying and pondering all the Acharya's commentaries for each verse, and with his prayers and his ecstatic love for Krishna, he would write his own commentary. But he decided to write a summary of the 10th canto as Krishna book. And it's interesting because Srila Prabhupada, he dedicated the book to his father, Gaur Mohan Dey. And he describes in that dedication how his father gave him the seed of devotional service. His father and mother, they gave him the deities of Radha and Krishna. They facilitated little Abai to have Rathayatras in little courtyards and alleyways of Calcutta. And Srila Prabhupada said the same seed of devotion that my father imbibed within me, I later dedicated my life to serving in the form of my Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Prabhupada, in a particular purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it describes Maharaj Parikshit, how when he was a little boy, he worshipped Krishna. Srila Prabhupada remembered when he was a child in Calcutta, how his father, he would see his father worshiping deities of Radha and Krishna, and he wanted to worship Radha and Krishna also. And it's interesting, the parallel of Maharaj Parikshit. Srila Prabhupada said, my father and mother gave me Radha Krishna and Bhakti, and later on it came to its completeness and fullness in my meeting my Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. In the case of Parikshit Maharaj, we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, when he was in the womb of his mother as an embryo, Ashwatthama sent a Brahmastra to murder him. How helpless is an embryo in the womb? His mother Uttara, when she saw this Brahmastra coming to kill her little child, with all her heart and soul, she cried out to Krishna. She took shelter of Krishna to protect her child. And Parikshit Maharaj, by Krishna's grace, was allowed to have full awareness of what was going on. Each and every one of us as little spirit souls within the wombs of our mothers, we were conscious beings, but our conscious was not yet so developed. But by the grace of Krishna, that soul of Parikshit Maharaj could actually see the Brahmastra coming to him. More deadly than an atomic weapon. And he heard his mother crying out for Krishna to save him. And Krishna appeared within the womb and saved him. From his childhood, from his mother, he received this. And later, after he was the emperor of the world and cursed to die in 7 days by the effect of his mother, his father, Abhimanyu was departed, but his grandparents, Arjuna, and his uncles, Yudhisthira, he had deep devotion. But when he was cursed to die in 7 days, he went to the bank of the Ganges, and that he took shelter of his guru, Srila Sukadeva Goswami. And it was in that setting that Sukadeva Goswami spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam. And one of the great sages who was present for that historical meeting was Sutta Goswami. And later in Naimisaranya, the great sages were gathered together and they were feeling so much pain in their hearts because they saw what was going to happen in Kali Yuga. How much suffering, how much pain, how much fighting and hypocrisy there would be. The age of quarrel and hypocrisy. When we read in the 12th canto the symptoms of what's going to happen in Kali Yuga, it should be no surprise what's happening in the world today. And this is just a sample of what will come later. So these great sages, they understood what Kali Yuga meant. They understand how people fight over nothing, even in the name of religion. They could see the wars. They could see the pandemics and the plagues and the depression and the suffering. They could see that addiction to immoral and sinful activities becomes the style. They were pained, paraduka duki. And they were wondering how to help the people. They were performing yajnas, and ultimately they inquired from Sutta Goswami. And Sutta Goswami, the formula to rescue the people in the age of Kali and bring them to the highest platform of devotional love is to hear and live the Srimad Bhagavatam. And what we have today that Vyasadeva has written for us is Sutta Goswami's narration of what he heard from Sukadeva Goswami of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is described, Krishna Swadamo Bhagavatam, that when Krishna departed from this world, he incarnated in the form of the Srimad Bhagavatam to give light in the darkness of Kali Yuga. There's a lot of suffering today, and so much confusion and uncertainty. But interestingly, the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken by Sukadeva Goswami for all of us in such a way that the highest, purest spiritual perfections are emerging from the most difficult, painful situations. In the first canto, the prayers of Kunti, Viparashantu Tashashvatatra Tatra Jagadguru. The amount of suffering endured by Queen Kunti in her life, we can't even calculate. She had to hide truths that were just too painful and would cause too much suffering to others. Her whole life, she saw her eldest son killed by her younger sons, and they didn't even know who he was. She saw her sons banished to the forest. And finally, after the Kurukshetra battle, when Krishna coronated Yudhisthira Maharaj and the Pandavas as the rulers of the world, and he was going back to Dwarka, Queen Kunti prayed, let these calamities happen again and again. Because in these calamities, I have no one else to turn to except you, Krishna. And when I turn to you and I see you, I no longer have to see birth and death. From the greatest sufferings and how much difficulty and challenge the Pandavas had in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Kardama Muni leaves Devahuti behind, and her son Kapila Dev speaks the Sankhya philosophy. He speaks a philosophy that is so logical and so philosophical and so scientific and in many ways very technical. He describes all varieties of creation to the level of the atom. But it all culminates in pure unalloyed devotional service to Krishna. And before he was about to leave for the world, his mother, Devahuti, who was in great distress, she was completely enlightened in pure devotional service by Kapila. And in the next canto, we have Dhruva Maharaj. How much he suffered. As we were suggesting before, when we read, to be absorbed in reading is not just an intellectual exercise. It needs to include our mind, our intelligence, and our heart. We feel these teachings. That's the reason they were spoken the way they are. Philosophy can convince the mind and the intelligence. But the Srimad Bhagavatam, this philosophy is spoken in the context of stories, the types of stories where the philosophy goes right to the core of our hearts because we feel for the people in the stories. Dhruva was 5 years old He was insulted by Suruchi, his stepmother, bitterly insulted. And his father, Uttanapada, did not protest. Now, he was a Kshatriya, and dishonor is worse than death. And that was so visible in him. He was crying. He was breathing so heavy. And his poor wife, his poor mother, Sunita, didn't know what to do. She said, the sages, they look for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when they're in this kind of distress. They go to the forest. And she was just saying that to try to console him. But Dhruva took it so seriously. 5 years old, he left his palace and went to the forest. In fact, he went to Vrindavan, to the forest of Madhuban. And there he met Narada Muni, who sent him to the bank of the Yamuna in Madhuban. And gave him the process of devotional service. And there Dhruva, he was hurt so bad. The austerities he performed and the drita vrata, the determination he executed in those austerities, were inconceivable. That was how much he was taking shelter in his suffering. And the culmination is he surrenders his heart and his life to Lord Narayan in Vrindavan. And when he's offered any benediction, he wants nothing but to always remember the Lord and never forget him. And to be the servant of the servant of the servants. He cared nothing for his kingdom or anything else. He just wanted to be the servant of the servant in loving devotion. And in that spirit, he was sent back to be the king. In the 5th canto, we have Bharat Maharaj. I'm running out of time. I don't want to go too long. But Bharat Maharaj, he was living at the Kali Gandaka River in the peaks of the Himalayas in what is now Nepal. He was meditating. And somehow, due to inattentiveness and a lack of association of devotees, he became attached to a deer and became a deer. Such a crisis. But in his next life, he became Jad Bharat, a pure, unalloyed devotee of the Lord who was constantly absorbed in loving devotional service to Krishna. And even the king, Rahugana, became his disciple. In the 6th canto, we have Ajamil. Ajamil was a nice devotee at a youth, but due to bad association, he became so corrupt, so materialistic, so selfish and arrogant. But when he was on his deathbed and he saw the Yamadutas, what a crisis that was. He called his son Narayan. And just by reciting the name Narayan, he remembered Narayan. And he was saved by the Vishnu Dutas. And in that state, he went back to the Himalayas and he dedicated his life and soul to pure, unalloyed devotional service. In the 7th canto was Prahlad. Every type of tragedy, every type of crisis, every type of danger humanly imaginable was cast upon him. But by the association of his guru, Narada Muni, Prahlad was always taking shelter of Krishna. Abhaya Charana Ravindare, he was fearless. And later, when Narasimha Dev offered him any benediction, he said, I'm not. if I ask for anything of you, Lord, I'm not your devotee. I'm just a business person. I don't want anything except to please you, to serve you, to love you, to be the servant of your servants. And please, I don't even want liberation. I only want to serve you, and let me stay in this world and remind everyone who has forgotten you, to those who are suffering. Gajendra was really an emergency. He was being dragged down by a crocodile. Nobody could help him. He was humiliated. He was in absolute pain and defeated. And in that state, he took shelter of Krishna and became completely happy and achieved the highest liberation. And Lord Shiva, Vaishnavanam Yatha Sambhu, when he saw the suffering that was imminent for the whole universe, he was willing to drink an entire ocean of poison in compassion. And in the 9th canto, there's Ambarish Maharaj. When Durvas Muni sent this fiery monster that had the power to destroy the world, and this monster came was just inches away from devouring Ambarish Maharaj. And he stood with his palms folded, just, Krishna, I'm yours. That was Ambarish. And Krishna sent his Sudarshan chakra. It dispatched the fiery demon and then went toward Durvas Muni. And Durvas Muni ran everywhere, to Brahma, to Shiva, and ultimately to Vishnu. And Vishnu said that I'm always in the heart of my devotee, and my devotee is always in my heart. If you hurt my devotee, you are hurting me. Go to Ambarish. Ambarish was fasting for 1 full year because he was so respectful and kind and forgiving, and prayed for Krishna to be kind to Durvasa, who tried to kill him. Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he prays, Maro birako bijo ichatoha nityada saprati tua adhikar. That Krishna, if you want to kill me or if you want to protect me, you can do anything you like, because I am your servant unconditionally. That was the mood of Ambarish Maharaj. And then the Srimad Bhagavatam, after preparing our consciousness from the first word of the first verse of the first canto, it leads us through these beautiful narrations of devotees who were transformed by the association of great souls and passed through the most difficult possible circumstances and became pure devotees. In the 9th canto, Ranti Dev, he was on the verge of death due to starvation. And he prayed to Lord Krishna that I only have one prayer. In every birth I take, let me give up my life for the well-being of others. And the para upakar, the supreme well-being, is to give people the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It culminates in the 10th canto, where we read about Krishna's appearance in this world, his wonderful, beautiful, loving relationships with Nanda and Yashoda in Vatsalya Ras, in Sakya Ras, with Lord Balaram and Subala, Sridama, Stoka Krishna, Sudama, Madhu Mangala, and the gopis, Madhurya Ras. We read about Krishna's wonderful pastimes, the highest loving exchanges with the gopis. And all the gopis are simply assistants in various unique ways to Srimati Radharani, who is Krishna's Ladini Shakti, his pleasure potency. And where Srimad Bhagavatam concludes, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita begins. Lord Chaitanya comes to taste the sweetness of Radha's love. And in the mood of Mother Radharani, he's freely giving that love to all of us. How? Through the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the culmination of Srimad Bhagavatam is the chanting of the holy names. The Bhagavatam concludes with the glorification of Kirtan, the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Kalera dosani ranjan asti heka mahan guna, kirtanareva krishnasya mukta sangha param. The Bhagavatam describes in this age of Kali, there is an ocean of faults, but there is one benediction. Simply chanting the names of Krishna, one can attain the supreme perfection of liberation, prema bhakti. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapite Mena Bhutale. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally declared in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that when he embraced Srila Rupa Goswami at Prayag, he invested himself and his love, his prema bhakti, into Rupa Goswami's heart. Our beloved Srila Prabhupada, every day at the Radha Damodar temple, as he was writing his commentaries of Srimad Bhagavatam, he would go to the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami and pray for his mercy. On this 125th anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's Vyas Puja, we're being given opportunities to reciprocate with Srila Prabhupada's love. Throughout my devotional life, I heard and I've recalled in many ways a simple statement of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was asked, how could we best serve you? Srila Prabhupada said, simply receive what I'm giving you and share it with others. First, share it among yourselves, the devotees, and then share it with the world. Srila Prabhupada put more of his life and more of his energy into his Srimad Bhagavatam than practically anything else. To receive his mercy is to study it, to learn it, to feel Srila Prabhupada's divine grace in every word that he's speaking. And Srila Prabhupada, when he established our movement, every day at every temple is Srimad Bhagavatam class. First is Mangal Arti, where we chant the prayers of the greatest commentator of Srimad Bhagavatam, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And we follow the essence of the Bhagavatam by chanting our japa. And then we have a class every day on Srimad Bhagavatam. One verse a day. How Srila Prabhupada wanted us to go deep into the study. An entire class on one verse, just expanding on his purport. So in this way, we're sharing the Srimad Bhagavatam with each other at every temple. And then book distribution. All of Srila Prabhupada's books, whatever book it is based on the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. To receive what he's given us and to share it with others. This wonderful event of Bhadra Purnima, Srimad Bhagavatam distribution, is such a blessing. To share the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam with the whole world to our capacity. The Srimad Bhagavatam is so rare, durlabha. But by Srila Prabhupada and Mahaprabhu's mercy, there's no shortage of how we can receive entire 12 canto sets. During the times of Mahaprabhu's associates, it took years to get one volume. Here, we can have it in our homes, and we can distribute them in our temples. In our own homes, we can distribute. The Srimad Bhagavatam gives this wonderful benediction that simply by giving as a gift the Srimad Bhagavatam on the Bhadra Purnima, such a blessing we get. We're preparing to go back to the spiritual world. Yes, this is an opportunity to serve and to please Srila Prabhupada and all of our acharyas who live the Srimad Bhagavatam. How proud they will be of each and every one of you. All of our acharyas in Parampara live for the Srimad Bhagavatam, and to each and every one of us who are making an effort to read it and distribute it. Can never be calculated, the blessings we will receive. Yes, Srila Prabhupada was born under a jackfruit tree. And also under a jackfruit tree, he met his Guru Maharaj and received this message. Take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and teach and bring it to the Western world and the whole world in the English language. That was Srila Prabhupada's life and soul. Thank you, Vaisesika Prabhu. Thank you with all of our hearts for allowing us such an intimate entrance into Srila Prabhupada's life and soul. And thank you to each and every one of you who I hope and pray will very enthusiastically share the Srimad Bhagavatam with others. It may seem difficult, but the whole message of Srimad Bhagavatam is overcoming difficulties by taking shelter of Krishna. And we're being given that blessing today. Thank you very much. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
Maharaj, we're so deeply grateful was a full meal for us. And for me, the most important part of Bhadra Purnima is hearing you speak about the Bhagavatam. It's really such a great excuse to come together and intensify our hearing and chanting and realizations. And honestly, for me, hearing your talk is the most important part of it. With your blessings, we feel confident now to smash our goal. And if you can wait just a couple minutes, I want to show the maps just so you can look at them and see what's happening in the world and what we're doing. Would that be okay?
Actually, Vaisesika Prabhu, I'm sorry if I spoke over time, but my plan was whatever I was speaking was just going to be an introduction for you.
Maharaj, when you speak, there is no time. Honestly, there's no sense that there's a beginning and end. It's Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So let's show Maharaj the maps, please. So the Goloka, Go to Goloka campaign, as everybody knows, is ongoing. It's an eternal program. And our end date this year is the 20th. September 20th. Tattoo it on your arm on the way home from the temple today. Our goal is to distribute at least 25,000 sets of Srimad Bhagavatam globally. We have 9 days to go. We can do what happens in 7 days with Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, which changed the world, which Maharaj just talked about. We have 9 days, counted an extra 2. So use every minute, and we can do something that's never been done before. No one ever has distributed at least 25,000 sets of Bhagavatams as a team all over the world. It's never been done. We'll have a culmination of this with a yajna at Naimisharanya that will be attended by great pundits and speakers, and that the world will tune in. And we'll also see on the screen every person who has given a Bhagavatam as a gift. Everybody's name will be displayed during this yajna. Please come. Now, here, Maharaj, for your consideration are what the continents are looking like. Pledges, you'll see, at 238. It means that's their goal. They've given their pledge, they will distribute at least 238 sets. And as of now, 123 have been distributed in Australia. New Zealand, the pledge is 141. Actual to date is 28. Last year, we really closed the gap in the last week. So these numbers are going to obviously change, and we're going to hit the pledges and probably more. Fiji, which is coming up fast, has pledged 8 and has done 8. Haribol, Fiji. Far East, including Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Middle East, and Pakistan, have pledged 5,195. So far, we have actual 83. Europe has pledged 1,683, and actual so far is 635. India, which looks like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's body dancing during the Rath Yatra when his skin erupted in goose pimples. The whole continent is in ecstasy because of the ecstatic approach of the leaders and all the devotees there to distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. 18,661. I don't see an actual and a pledge, but anyway, they're going to excel that, I'm sure. Africa, the continent is coming up. We want to see the African continent look like India sometime soon. The pledges are 231, actuals are 32. South America, 540, all Spanish-speaking nations. North America, pledges are 4,660. I know here at ISV, the devotees are going 24 hours to reach their goal, and I know all the other devotees are in the same mode in this last 9 days to close the gap. We sent out the merchandise, the merch, to devotees in various places. And we launched Shraddhan, which is the program in which people can have books given, Bhagavatam sets or other books given on behalf of their departed loved ones. And there's shraddhan.com. You can visit that for information how to sign up. We also have Gram Vidyadham. This is a huge program to place at least 800,000 sets of Bhagavatams in the 800,000 villages of India. Bhakti Raghava Swami had conceived this idea and started going around one at a time. And then it was in the hundreds, now in the tens of thousands. And people are have an opportunity to donate for that. We have a couple of videos on this that everyone can share. I recommend using this for the last 9 days because it's extremely powerful. Please check in to tracker.bhadracampaign.com to put your scores in. We need them as soon as possible so we can keep the maps up to date for everybody going into the last part of the marathon. And let's all go to Goloka. Hare Krishna. The links, please copy the links that Shamohini has put over in the box so you can watch the videos and use them and pass them on to others. Main point is to network with everyone as much as possible. Show the Bhagavatam, because if you bring it up, if you show it, people will take it. And Shamohini, do you have any comments you want to make about the maps?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. The only comment I want to make is that we want to encourage devotees to start reporting their actuals so that the maps can be as close as possible to the actuals as we make the offering on the day of Bhadra Purnima. Thank you.
Jai. Dear devotees, thank you very, very much for joining from all over the world. Radhanath Swami Maharaj, thank you very, very much for filling our hearts with the desire to please Srila Prabhupada. I would say when Swarup Damodar Maharaj had heard, he was Purushottam, when he heard that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had taken sannyasi, he commented that I became like a madman. And in the song, we hear Dai Tava Pache Pache. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I'm running after my guru. And the reason is his guru is running after his guru. There's a kind of madness that comes all the way down from Madhavendra Puri into our Sampradaya. Srila Prabhupada had it. Otherwise, why did he get on a boat at an advanced age with no support, apparently, and come to distribute books? And he didn't stop until his last breath. We may say correctly that we cannot write such books. We cannot stay up in the middle of the night to do such things, but we can try to distribute and read them with such vigor. Birds fly in the sky as high as they're able. The sky is unlimited. But even the attempt of the smallest bird to do something, to follow in the footsteps of the great acharyas, will be the saving grace. It's the rope that will pull us back to Godhead. It's also a uniting force during a time when there's a requisite dichotomy in everything that happens during Kali Yuga. We can rise above it by uniting around the principle of distribution and reading of Srimad Bhagavatam together. I see it as the most important glue that we have to repair to the distribution and hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. Dear devotees, 9 days left. Please lean into it as hard as you can. Let's smash this goal. 25,000 is nothing. It's just a beginning. It's just a number. And we have to go way past it. We have to think in huge, huge numbers to match the kind of spiritual madness that Srila Prabhupada had to get on the Jaladuta. Let's take advantage. We only have a few years left in our lives anyway, and who knows if we have that. Please, together, holding hands all around the globe, let's do something that will astound the world and it will bring us together and unite us. Maharaj, thank you very much. You're our life and soul. You are the living Bhagavatam, and we deeply, deeply appreciate your walking the earth and giving us your association without a moment's hesitation. Hare Krishna. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Panchatattva, dear Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Radha Govinda, Shri Radha Gopinath, Shri Lakshmana Shringadev, if you so desire, please empower our global team to smash our goal of distributing at least 25,000 sets of Srimad Bhagavatam by September 20th for Bhadra Purnima. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone who agrees with this goal, in part or in whole, please unmute and say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Ram.
Hare Ram.
Hare Ram. Hare Krishna. Vaisesika Prabhu ki jai. Radhanath Swami Maharaj ki jai.